Never mind.
Charlie, I'm leaving now.
See ya.
Okay. Sorry, we had some just getting ready technically. All right, let's so work session for the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs. Today is June 10th. It's a Wednesday at 5:04. Let's call this meeting to order. We have on the agenda this evening a continuation of our conversation about council norms and decorum. We had a several-hour meeting last week. We made some progress before our council meeting, and it was decided at that time to continue the subcommittee work at this meeting. So Tony had asked to be able to lead off and make a statement for the press. So go ahead, Mr. Hershey.
Well, it's a question and a statement. Colorado has an independent ethics commission, Mr. Mayor. The Independent Ethics Commission is a constitutionally created independent commission and is charged with the implementation of Article 29 of the Colorado Constitution. And the purpose of that is to give advice and guidance on ethics issues arising out of Article 29. It also makes fines, assesses penalties, and sanctions where appropriate. The commission has jurisdiction over all state executive and legislative branch elected officials and employees, and the commission also has jurisdiction over local officials and employees unless a county or a municipality is a home rule entity that has adopted charters, ordinances, or resolutions that address matters covered by Article 29. So I think what we're doing here with everything is going on is a little bit duplicitous. I understand why we're doing this, but to say, I would ask that we request the city attorney who's not here, look into the constitutionality. Let's say, for example, there's an election, Mr. Mayor, in April, and I choose to oppose one of the candidates. Am I not allowed to say bad things about him because of this ethics thing? This can't trump my First Amendment rights. And I can't support doing that. And, being critical of staff in an election, I imagine that's going to be an issue. So a candidate running against a city council person can go, you have the worst streets department in the world. They're terrible. And the city councilman goes, geez, I can't say anything because I'd be violating our ethics. And I'm being a little facetious, obviously, but I think this is a dangerous path that we're going down. And I'm willing to listen tonight. And I appreciate Charlie working so hard on this, but I think it is unnecessary because the state has already addressed these issues. And I see no reason to proceed. I understand that it's a response, but like I told you before the meeting started, I feel like the prisoner helping to design his own cell. This is obviously directed at me because of what happened. One would think that you guys are sick of getting bad press, but if you want to continue to go down this road, go ahead. But I just don't think that we'll be able to follow any of this. And it's not about me. This is 10 years from now or 20 years from now. You're putting restrictions on people and on their right to speak and their right to talk that are unfair. And just because I'm a city council person, I don't lose my First Amendment and free speech rights. So I'm happy to listen, but I wish Charlie and the city attorney could address some of those issues. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess, Tony, I know that there's some people think that everything is about them, but this is not about you actually at all. This has been going on for 3 years since Rick, Shelley, and I were elected to city council. This is something that I brought up probably in the first month of being elected in 2017. I had heard that previous city council people had taken conversations that had happened during city council meetings. They would discuss, debate, and vote on resolutions, on legislation. And then a city council person would get upset and go to social media and talk about how that wasn't, how they were railroaded and things were already decided. And it wasn't a very healthy or productive way to conduct business. And so what I had suggested is that we get a facilitator to put guardrails on how we behave. So as a group, this was the old council, by the way, over 3 years ago. As a group, we could all decide on council norms that here's how we talk in social media. Here's how we talk to the public. Yes, of course, we have First Amendment free rights and we can say anything, but as a legislative body, to be able to have conversation amongst ourselves and to be able to debate ideas and thoughts without it getting personal or without violating a code of ethics that we all subscribe to, I thought was valuable. We've had this conversation, if you'll remember, about 9 months ago, we actually brought in a facilitator, gymnast, I can't remember her last name, to lead us through something like this, because again, it was something that we had talked about continually. Before you or Charlie or Paula were elected, Shelley Kopp had brought in an example from Littleton. And you can go back through all the meetings if you would like to see all the times we have discussed this over the last 3 years. And that example from Littleton, Charlie has seen, I have seen, Rick have seen, that goes back several years. So it's not about you. We've been talking about this process for 3 years. Obviously, when you have a city council person after being seated for 2 months in a public meeting threatening to fire senior staff, to everybody who will listen, that does create a little bit more of an urgency. And yes, it is difficult when we have a facilitator come into our midst to be able to help guide us through this. But then you have a city council person throw a hissy fit to the degree that person, that contractor, drops us as a client and says, I will not work with these people again. I think that's a symptom that it's needed. It's needed amongst ourselves. And yes, I'd be interested to see what this independent commission would possibly be able to give us as far as advice or guidance specifically for events that have happened in the last month. But I think what we are trying to accomplish here last week and this week is at least an understanding amongst us about how we are going to act, about how we are going to behave. And of course, these are guidance documents. And if we want to be able to deal with ourselves as a body, that is completely our right. So if you say something and we don't like it and we want to address that, that is our right. We were within our rights to write that letter to you, and that is our First Amendment rights as well. So please don't ask us to infringe upon our First Amendment rights as well.
And that wasn't I'm sorry. And that wasn't, I hit the wrong button, Jonathan. That wasn't my intent. And you and I have had these conversations about the past council, so I appreciate that. So I said to you, I was going to listen, but I just wanted to make my position clear. But I want to listen and participate. So thank you.
Thanks. Charlie.
Yeah. So I guess just to start out to address it, I don't want to get into all the history. It's not my goal here in drafting this and trying to come up with this. I'm not aware of this commission. I mean, I've heard the name before, but I'm not aware of what the statute says or anything. And first I heard about it was immediately prior to the meeting today, so I haven't had a chance to take a look at that. But I certainly think something we ought to incorporate. I can tell you personally, as the primary drafter of this document so far, I'm not trying to restrict anyone's First Amendment rights. And when we ultimately get around to adopting this code, I would suspect that our city attorney will look at it and take into consideration, you know, if there are things that we can't do because it limits First Amendment, if there's another way to word it. Certainly, Tony, if you see some wording we can change in this, that's the purpose of this meeting, is to come up with language that we all feel we can live by, all 7 of us can live by. And not to impose on anybody. Was this precipitated by the events a few weeks ago? We probably brought it back to the forefront. Jonathan talked about the history. My goal is to move forward. Let's see if we can come up with a policy. I have, and this, by the way, this policy is, I mentioned this in this last city council meeting, but this is a compilation of Littleton's code, which you mentioned, Jonathan, Town of Meade, Netherland, Town of Johnstown, and Brush, Colorado, and Fountain, Colorado, and Monte Vista. Those are the various codes that I looked through, and they all look somewhat the same. Lots of municipalities have codes of conduct, and they all have the same way. It's written differently in each one. Is this the right way to write or not? I have pride of authorship, but I am not. Also, I'm willing to listen to any changes. And if there's a better way to word it, there's a better way to organize this. I think that's important. That's what we're here to do. So. Unmute, John.
Thank you. So Charlie, you were kind of taking notes the last time we were meeting, and you probably had our place where we left off. And so would you be able to pick up back as kind of the, I guess, secretary of the group?
Yeah, why don't I share a screen? Because what I did, I sent this out in the email earlier this week, and I think you all got this. It's in the, I believe it's in the agenda packet for tonight. I didn't actually look at it, but I assume it's there for the public as well. I took what we did last meeting. I tried to incorporate it into the draft. We actually had gotten down to the last thing we hadn't discussed is sanctions. So we can decide to pick up there, or we can look back over the change I made and see if there's other wording changes we need to make here. But let me share my screen, and I'm going to put what I believe to be an updated draft from the city council meeting last week. Are you seeing my inbox, or are you seeing the screen I'm trying to get?
We're seeing your screen.
And does it say code of conduct on it?
It does.
All right, let me see why I don't have that in mind. Let's see, you're there. All I see right now is the screen of the people in the meeting.
Yeah, it should basically, you'll see the windows of the people, but what we are seeing is that document, but it's gone now. It's down to just your Zoom window now.
All right, so that's the screen I'm sharing. All right, damn it. Excuse my language, I should have said that. All right, well, I can work with it off of the set of different monitors. So as long as I know that's the monitor we're working from. So at the meeting of city council, we didn't talk about this section here, the purpose. Everybody see where I'm pointing? Because I can't see the screen on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so does anybody see anything in the purpose section that we should change? And I guess, Jonathan, do you want to do this? You want to pick up the sanctions and then come back and look at the overall topic? You know that.
Well, yeah, and so there's I guess there's two things. There's sanctions that we can get to, and then I guess what I'd also like from this committee and then the council at large is, as the presiding officer, to have an understanding and a buy-in about what my roles and responsibilities and limits are. So, in the event that somebody in a meeting is being unruly, is that something where, what is my prescription? I would kind of like guidance from this group to be able to say, like, yeah, gavel somebody down. And if they insist, or later in the meeting they need to be gabbled down again, then we can get to sanctions and prescriptions. But I don't want to, I guess, move all the way to, well, here's what we do at the end of the day, and jump to the 1 yard line. I'd kind of like to know from this group if there's a, kind of what my role as presiding officer or any future mayor or presiding officer would have.
Do we get just now, it popped up Bob's Rules of Order?
Yep.
You see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So this, and I sent this out as well, but separate document, this kind of addresses those kind of issues as the procedures during meetings. And yeah, so general rules govern meetings. So if we want to start there, that's fine. I mean, I put that's a little bit separate from the code of conduct, but this discusses this, and I think we need to integrate those two documents together.
Mhm.
But I wanted to try to get through one, then look at the other, and then I might have to take another shot at maybe some things that move out of the code of conduct, it'd be the rules of procedure, like public quorum or in the meetings, that says how the public is and how we react to the public in the meeting. That might be better in the procedural rules than in the code of conduct. There's some cross, I'm looking for things that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just Rick had his hand up, so I want to recognize Rick.
Thank you. I'm just wondering how you all would feel about calling this a code of conduct and ethics, because, they're not necessarily always one and the same thing. And I think there's enough ethical language in here to be able to allow us to comfortably call it that.
I'm fine with that.
Right, and it doesn't have to be that way. I'm just making a suggestion. And so I guess if I can, I'd prefer to zero in on the conduct and ethics document right now, and then maybe come back around to Bob's Rules of Order. And I agree that they have to be synchronized, but I think maybe if we stay on track with one document for our time together this afternoon, it might be a little bit more productive.
And I just made if that's where you want to go, I'm okay either way, but code of conduct ethics, I added that, but I now put it tracking so that as I do this, you'll be able to see what I'm actually adding to it under redlining. So.
Okay.
I don't know how you want to proceed, Mr. Mayor. So.
I'm fine with this going through, Charlie, where you were. If we want to jump down to sanctions, that's fine by me.
We didn't discuss that at the last meeting. The rest of the changes I've made, or I tried to make, I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at that. And again, this is probably poorly worded, remedy and sanctions. So this might be something, as you were mentioning, Mr. Mayor, that deals with how do we get to this? And it's kind of like in here, we talk about the mayor shall determine an issue, and so we might want to talk about how do we get to the procedures? There's going to be a sanction. What's the procedure for doing that? So we might want to expand this section to put stuff like that in there. So. Any thoughts?
Rick, Tony?
I don't,
Can you make up now?
no, I'm good. I'm reading it.
Well,
Can you
I
slide it
would,
over a little, Jonathan, or I can't. Well, I'll do it. I got it. Sorry, Rick.
no worries. What I was going to say is that it's a little bit not consistent. I mean, we have terms like that we borrowed, like sergeant at arms. And we don't have, I don't think, a sergeant at arms. We have, so we might want to talk about that, whether we want a sergeant at arms. The idea of 2 strikes and you're out. And I think that applies to both council members and anybody that's at a council meeting or a subcommittee meeting. So, but other than that, I mean, I kind of like where this wound up.
There is this here I sent out. I don't know if you guys all had a chance to look at this stuff, but Rick, you had said it that I think you said Hubbard Code of Conduct. This is, I call it the Washington Code, but that's actually the Hubbard. And this is a little more structure to the process. And that's why I wanted to put it in so you can see that. And then I just added this section, which is personal expectations. A lot of the codes in Colorado have the code of conduct, and they have the separate section called personal expectations, and it's kind of like a title page. So, but anyway, just to show you what I was doing there.
Mhm.
So again, I don't know how you want to proceed. This is difficult when we're doing online, so we're all looking at my version. I've got to scroll for everybody, so it's a lot easier when you got paper in front of you. You can scratch and write it in paper and look at various documents. So I guess let me just start. Let's talk about paragraph 8, serious or continuing. And let's see if the principles are there, then we can maybe talk about organization. Serious or continuing violations of this code of conduct should give rise to the conscious questions of whether or not a council member should voluntarily resign. And I think, we obviously under our code, and this is different if you're a statutory town and things, there are procedures for removal. Under our charter and code, there is no procedure for removing a council member other than, I think, and that's state law. I don't think it's in the charter. Carl here can tell you for sure, but is recall. And that may be in the charter. I just don't remember. I have those provisions, that document I sent out last week. And then the next one, B, is just, these are some ideas of things you could do. In other words, before you get to, if you're going to publicly censure somebody, the remedial educational training and the only things I could think of when I was reading this in other people's codes is there is training CML puts on, various webinars and things. And if you haven't attended those, you can go back as a member of CML, which we all are, and actually watch the webinars on your own. So it could be a requirement that you have to look at this webinar about, decorum during a council meeting, or how you address motions and amendments to motions, if that be the particular violation, that being very vague. This concept here in C, and I think this is found in the Bob's rules I was talking about earlier, is kind of like a step 1 during a meeting. So if someone thinks that someone else has said something inappropriate toward the council member, what they would do would be they say, Mr. Mayor, as a point of personal privilege, and then you're supposed to write down what the person said and you bring that up. So let's say that, Rick, you called me a blind, fat old man. I would say,
It would be accurate.
it would be accurate, but leave that out for a moment, So, no, let's say he did that. Then I would say, Mr. Mayor, as a point of personal privilege, Mr. Voorhees Councilman Voorhees just said that I was a blind old fat guy, and I take personal offense to that because it has nothing to do with our discussion, even though it might be true. And then Jonathan, you as mayor would determine if you thought it was a violation and would ask the Councilman Voorhees to apologize. And then if it continues during the meeting, it could result in public censure during the meeting
Victory is narrow.
or expulsion from the meeting. These are just ideas. This is not the way we ought to do it. But the question is that what we want to do? Do we want to have that's kind of a graduated process during the meeting. See if I get all that.
Excuse me, Charlie. Hey, Councilor Hershey, is there any way you could mute yourself if you're going to be on a phone call with somebody else during the meeting? Thank you. Go ahead, Charlie.
So anyway, that's kind of a graduated, something's going on at a particular meeting. That's a graduation during a meeting.
One of the, if I may, But one of the questions, and I like the way that this is getting laid out, Charlie, good job. You know, we say 2/3 of the council members present. So, and that could be, you know, if it's 3 people, that would be 2 people. If it's 6 people, that would be 4. And that's sort of a moving target because the denominator is going to change with the purpose of the meeting. But if all 7 people are there and there's going to be a vote, would we allow the person at whom the point of personal privilege is directed to also vote? And I don't mean to get too far in the weeds. It's just one thing I noticed here. If we use
No.
2/3, that sounds good, but
I don't think that's a weed. I think that's what we're trying to figure out is how to do that. And I guess in response to your question, I would say, yeah, why not? I
okay.
mean, but probably going to vote if they're unwilling to apologize. They're probably going to vote against it. So
And I think 2/3 of the attendees is fine. Because if all 7 were there, would that require 5 out of 7? My math's not, I don't have my
Yeah, it would
calculator.
be. Yeah, that'd be 71%.
yeah,
Yeah, and I,
understand, Jonathan, I'm sorry, the 7, can you explain that to me again?
yeah. So basically, if there's the majority of council, 2/3 of council feel that there is a violation, then we would vote on that. If there was a violation, to ascertain if there's even a violation, to have the conversation further.
yeah. So let's say, if Steve Davis was in Texas and, for a while and he couldn't participate in a meeting because he was traveling or something like that. So we have 6 members. I'm not picking on Steve. I just tried to get an example. So you have to have 4 people voting for this. So, and I certainly think that all 7 council members should vote, or all 6 if that's the case. There's no reason if I've done this, and Rick, you think your statement was not intended to be offensive, was intended to be a comment on my looks, which is appropriate in the circumstances. You ought to be able to vote and say, no, I don't think I ought to be, sanctioned. And again, that really only gets done if it's an ongoing thing. And I didn't really put something in right here. If you don't apologize, what happens? Maybe we want to put something in there. I'm just trying to think out loud of things that could happen.
And Charlie, I guess I would say that if, I mean, apology is nice, and that can probably help, but I don't know that that an apology is what censure or expulsion of a meeting should be contingent on. Because if somebody does something egregious, they're free to apologize, but I don't think that if someone says something horrible and horrific, oh, whoops, sorry, like, well, that you can't take that back. I don't think that an apology, the way it reads, well, it says egregious. I guess it does. Egregious and continued inappropriate behavior during a meeting can result with a 2/3. Okay. Yeah. I never mind.
When you look at that language, very honestly, when I drafted it, wasn't if Rick said the one comment about me and he apologized, or even if he didn't apologize, if he didn't say anything else in the meeting, we move on. We don't need to be doing these battles during the meeting. It would only be if 10 minutes later, Rick now calls me, a poorly dressed fat slob. And he continues to make personal attacks at me. That's why I put egregious, and those are connectors. It has to be both.
And I guess I would look for what is the defining, what would bring that up? How would we identify it's egregious or continued inappropriate behavior? And so I guess I would suggest, Charlie, that we have something in there where any member of council can move to a vote based on their interpretation of what is either egregious or continually inappropriate.
Tony? So
Yeah, but would you do it in context, Charlie? By that, I mean, I don't know.
That's why we're here. I'm trying to get, I stole language from various places, and if we don't have enough detail or we need to put in something more, what is it we want to add here? Do we want to have that any member of council can make a motion that for the council to vote on whether Rick's behavior toward Charlie Wellman is egregious and continuing.
Yeah, I think I would like that, and that's just my vote. Because I think that it's tough just, again, being the presiding officer sometimes to notice when these things are happening, when they're happening. You know, there's so much, especially online like this, of lowering hands and raising hands, and maybe even, you know, hopefully someday when we meet back in person, you know, taking the temperature of the room and making sure staff is being heard and acknowledged as well. So I think anybody can bring anything to a vote at any time, you know, within the context. And I think if somebody says something egregious or repetitively inappropriate, and they apologize, I think the person who is acknowledged that or who is offended by that, whether it's about them or not, should be able to say, you know, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to take a vote on a censure and or expulsion. And I think that would, I don't know, I think that would work.
I'm okay.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Go ahead, Tony.
By expulsion, you mean, okay, this person has to leave.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we should maybe spell that out as well. I
It says
know
right
there's,
here, from the meeting, from the meeting in which the conduct occurs. It's not.
No, I understand from the meeting.
Huh?
You're not going to send them out of town on a rail, are you?
No, from the
No.
meeting.
what was your question, Tony? I'm sorry.
No, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Um,
Wait a minute, we can't tell them to get out of sundown before noon, you know, can't tell them to get out of town before sundown. You know, and I
Tar
agree.
and feather.
No, I said that, not you, Tony.
I know, I'm joking. I understand.
I know
That's
you
why
were. I know you were.
In context, I wish we could have a little whatever. Okay.
so I guess the other question, at least that I have, is what does censure mean? I mean, I hear the term thrown around a lot, and I know it's you know, it's
So
kind of what we did to Tony, but like, what does it mean, like, in this context?
I would assume in this is what I was intending when I drafted and took from other codes, is that I move that Rick Voorhees be publicly censured for the inappropriate comments made to Charlie Wilman during this council meeting, and that we recognize that this public censure means that we believe as a council his behavior is inappropriate at tonight's meeting. And it's really just, it's a public statement that we're censoring his behavior. We're not approving his behavior. That's the way I read it.
Okay.
And if you try to get too detailed, then you're have trouble allowing some flexibility for what may happen. I'm using that example of Rick and me just because it's a way for us to talk about it, but it could be any number of things which could happen. It could be, you know, somebody starting to throw paper airplanes across the room from the dais. You know, I'm thinking of things that not as done service don't seem to be bad, but it becomes disruptive because the public is not, and we're not paying attention to what's going on. We're watching the paper airplanes flying.
And honestly, I was just asking because I didn't
Yeah,
I just didn't really know what censure meant. So that answers the question.
That's my interpretation. That's all I can tell you is one person.
Yeah. Hey, Tony, is there any way that you could turn your screen on just so we can all see each other?
It's going on and off.
Yeah, Tony mentioned before he's having some internet problems this time of
Is
night.
it now on?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm better now.
Tony should move up a block and get that.
I know.
I'm teasing.
I'm going to get it as soon as it's available.
Yeah,
It would
I
be
know.
better.
It's great stuff. Okay,
All right, that's better. I'm good. It just said internet low, but now it's better.
okay. So is there anything else that we would want to put in this paragraph? Anybody? Okay, so that's in a council meeting. Outside a council meeting is paragraph D. And again, this is kind of plagiarized from several different council members I mean, some different municipalities' codes. And the idea is if something happens outside of a meeting, for instance, Rick runs into me at the grocery store in front of all the public, calls me a fat old, slob and shouldn't be on the city council because I can't think straight, and does that in a meeting, then I would contact the mayor and say, this happened at City Market at 4:00 in the afternoon on June 10th. And I would like you to resolve it. And then you, Jonathan, as a mayor, would take a look at that and see if you could call Rick up and make sure you resolve it to your satisfaction. It really is a lot of your discretion. This is where you are and everything in every code I've ever read, including the procedural code, the Bob's rules and Robert's rules of orders, as presiding officer, is supposed to do that. But if you don't get it resolved and Rick says, no, I think Wilman really is that, I'm happy to say it at any time, then I think you got to bring it to the attention of the council at the next meeting, or if it's really egregious and we need to do something quicker than the next meeting, call a special meeting for that purpose. And then we discuss the issue, and then you basically get into public censure, otherwise be reprimanded. And again, I don't know what you put in for otherwise reprimanded, other than it's a generic thing because circumstances may change. But that's what I'm trying to do, again, keeping that 2/3 vote. Because it shouldn't be something where 4 of us could decide something. That's why I want to keep that super majority in there. And that can be 3/4 if we want. That would be another percentage. It's usually 2/3 or 3/4. Most of the codes had 2/3, so that's what I used.
I think 2/3 is reasonable.
And thoughts, does this seem like a reasonable way to do it? Again, I think this is going to be fairly rare and becomes a he said, she said, or he said, as the case may be with Rick and I. So it's a difficult proposition, but I think we need something if it occurs outside a meeting that just, that one council member can't just continue to beat up another council member outside of a meeting and then act like everything's fine during a meeting. I think that's my thought when I drafted this.
Yeah, and heaven forbid that we would be using any of this stuff, but
Yeah.
it's there. So.
Any other thoughts from the rest of you? Just look okay in principle, and this gives rise somewhat to what Tony was talking about at the beginning of the meeting. When does Rick's right to say, that my vote and my view on these things is inappropriate on a particular issue because that's his view as a council member that's contrary to mine. And I remember, and I'm pretty sure Carl could probably say this for sure, there was a case actually came out of CMC, the court case that came out of CMC, and Tony shaking his head, so he may remember this as well. But they were trying to say you cannot go out and say anything bad at all. You can't disagree with the council. And one of the things up above here, I talk about the decorum, and the idea is that you generally support the council decision. If you don't think that we're spending money correctly, and I'm not picking on you, Tony, but it's just easier to use it as an example. Tony thinks you have to spend money just to fix streets. I think he gets to continue to say that. It doesn't have to support spending on Two-Rivers Park or things like that, but he doesn't. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to. There's a line there, and I'm not sure where that line is.
Yeah, and Charlie, I think this is what I was asking before, and your example can be applied to Rick and I and Shelley at the last council when we were, strongly pushing back against spending, to the level that we spent on 7th Street.
Right.
And so that was something that we got thrown into right away on that council. And again, that's what precipitated some of this conversation that's leading to this code of conduct, because I felt strongly that if somebody asked, I was going to say, no, I think it's crazy, the spending priorities that we have right now. But the majority of council feels that this is where we need to be spending the money right now. And so, it is what it is. And I'm on the losing side of things. And you know what? Our next council meeting is this time, this date, come and speak, during public comment, that might help the situation. I think that's appropriate to be able to have your First Amendment rights to disagree with a vote that the council took, but at the same time, not, again, get on social media and flamethrow people individually and allege, and I'm not saying that this happened. I don't know if it did or not, but I don't know that it did. Allege conflicts of interest, or they're just doing this because of this. Attacking the person, not the idea. So I think, this gives enough of a language, I feel, that if it allows for us to go out and disagree with the direction that the majority of council is taking and that we disagree with, but yet at the same time, if we go over a line and start to get personal and make accusations that are unfounded and cannot be founded, then I think that allows somebody to contact me for, me to hear what's going on, and then as the mayor presiding officer, be able to say, yeah, I need to bring this back to council for censure and or reprimand, like your language is. I feel comfortable with the language, but I'm interested to hear what Rick or Tony might think about it.
Yeah, what I was looking for when I'm scrolling here is like have something to that effect about personal attacks, and I think it's somewhere in this section. I'm trying to remember it. But go ahead, if somebody else wants to comment, I'm looking for that.
Go ahead.
So, if I can, yeah, just to say that all of what we've talked about so far is sort of within meetings or within council sort of behavior. I'm wondering what we would do if, let's say, some external agency came in and said, Rick Voorhees has committed fraud, maybe not in the city, but maybe as part of my professional practice. And he's up on charges for what he did. Would the council take any action? I mean, certainly you would want to wait until that was resolved, but you'd probably want to note that in some way. And if it was a felony, for instance, and again, I know the charter doesn't allow the council to expel anybody, but it's possible to have, a convicted felon sitting on the city council and no real remedy to get that person off.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, we don't have to look too far for an example from the last council, although he wasn't on the council anymore. But I would think that if someone, I would hope, would do the right thing, they might be otherwise indisposed if they're convicted of a felony, unless they're on probation, Charlie. Although there is an avenue for the voters to get rid of that person if he pushes it and refuses to leave.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the national level, I think Congress can expel members, but they can do that. But a lot of times the pressure, I think there's a guy from California that did a bunch of stuff. I can't think of his name.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But I don't know if the state code is in there or not. Going back to what I was starting to talk about, this is this idea that I was talking about. Council members can't belittle, degrade, or otherwise disparage any council members. And I expanded that language from the city council meeting because disparage, people didn't like that word alone. So I put belittle, degrade, or otherwise disparage council members. That's a little bit of adding there. It's basically to the public, so that's how you're probably going to be doing it, and maybe to teach to each other. I'll look at that language there. So let me go back down to sanctions, but I was trying to show you, I knew I had that language in there somewhere. So right now we're here in this D section.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you typing and making the changes as you go along. You're doing a great job. This is really helpful to move it along.
So given that's why I want to go back to the comment out in the public and what you can do and not to do. And I disparaging, belittling, degrading a council member to the public is not, unless Tony, you feel free to disagree with me here too, but I don't think that's protected speech. You can't go, if you commit fraud or theft, outside of the council meeting and nothing to do with the city, I may be able to make a comment in a city council meeting that maybe that's good grounds for you to think about whether you're serving the public interest by meeting the council. But we can't do anything other than that. And maybe That's not in here right now, by the way. There's nothing in here about that kind of conduct in this code at all. So
Yeah.
think about whether we're gonna add that. Anyway, do we need to change this section, I guess, that I've highlighted in blue?
So how would you change it, Charlie?
I'm comfortable with it. I'm just asking you guys if you
Oh,
think
I'm sorry.
if it does what you need. If we're gonna add the conviction of felony or something like that as inappropriate conduct, that probably gets back in on the upper sections of the code.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. So then, and then, you know, so we don't get to the elephant in the room. This gets to the issue we recently addressed, and again, not trying to make Tony seem bad in this meeting or anything like that. The issue is, what do we do? And there's a section about what you're in the up above in the code of conduct, what you can do and not do in executive session. But if it violates it, this is the what, again, this is not something I drafted from my own thoughts process. This is something that's actually in another code. And if we get back up here to executive sessions, you get into these sections here.
Yeah.
You know, and I would say that this is something, and you know, this is a document that's going to hopefully apply to future councils. So next council, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. If there's, yeah, so if there's something that we're looking at, like let's not focus on an incident or incidents in the last year that, you know, is leading for this language. This language was already in there. And I guess I would say this is one of those things, you know, again, in general, that is a really serious issue. And Charlie, can you talk about, if such conduct continues,
Yeah.
the city council may seek injunctive or other relief from the courts. Is there any precedent for that?
No, that I just rereading the language, and that I did add, because I was thinking, what's our remedy? Because we can't force someone to resign. Can we get injunctive relief that they not violate the executive session, the privilege of executive session? My view as a lawyer, not as a city council member, is you can get injunctive relief if they're injunctive relief in the rules of Colorado. Again, I can't give council legal advice and don't mean to do that, but in the rules of civil procedure in Colorado, if there is no actual damages, because injunctive relief is only available if there's no way to compensate the injured party by actual monetary damages. And I just, you know, I had a situation come up recently where this was an issue in not a city council forum, but another forum, and the court did issue injunctive relief. And I'll leave it at that because I got to be careful, you know, where I got attorney-client issues here. So I do believe it's a remedy that can be done, and this is just kind of notice that we can seek it. It doesn't say we have to seek it, just as a remedy if there's continuing and ongoing violation of confidentiality and sanctity, that we could go to court and get injunctive relief. Then there are other remedies the court can impose if the conduct continues. Tony, you agree with my interpretation of injunctive relief?
I was shaking my head. Yes, I do agree.
I thought so. That's why
Well, and I would also say that, you know, this document only has as much teeth as we want it to have. So if we want to put teeth into it, again, this is not about this council specifically. This is a document that hopefully will be reviewed with every council. And my goal would be, come second meeting of April of 2021, when we potentially have 3 new counselors sitting, you know, in this, you know, virtual chamber, that everybody takes a look at it, reviews it, says, yeah, this sounds about right, and signs it. And says, okay, I will sign on to this code of conduct because it seems good and reasonable and a way to do this. So if that's the case, I think we could have, Charlie, if you could go back to.
hang on.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to put that there so I don't forget to add that cited conduct. It's not in.
And so something that we do as a body that somebody signs on to, while I don't know the legalities of it, if it's an enforceable contract, but if you sign and say, I will abide by these rules and these remedies, then I think we could put something in there to say that if a violation occurs, that member will resign. And so if a hypothetical city council person 8 years from now does this and it says this person will resign and they sign on to it, having signed on to it a year or 2 years before, then they are either breaking their pledge to behave in a ethical manner, or they're not, you know. And so I think we can ask people to sign it, and if they sign on to this, and these are the remedies, and if I do something egregious like this, or some other ones that we'll talk about, I'm sure, then that member shall offer their resignation. You know, it shouldn't be up to us to ask for that resignation. It should be a prescriptive remedy that's just automatic.
Okay.
And I disagree, but.
Well, but Tony, why? I mean, it's again, not about you, but why would you disagree with that? If somebody wants to willingly enter into a contract and a code of conduct, and then they decide to break that contract or that code of conduct, why should they not be held? Again, you know, the charter. Just let me explain real quick. The charter allows the only way is a recall or an election. So you can of course break your code of conduct, but that in itself is bad. So what would be your objection? I'm sorry.
My objection would be that you and I are not opening up a deli, and we have a contract where if I don't fulfill my portion of the contract, we are elected by the people, and my position will continue to be that only the people can remove us. So,
and that's fine. And that's why I think I allow for the fact that, you know, if you sign on to this and you say, I will resign if I don't uphold this certain standard or continually violate this standard. Yes, you're right. You know, the municipal code or the charter does not allow for anything. I agree with you, but that will mean that you are breaking your own self-appointed code.
Right. But what if not you or me, but 20 years from now, I don't know.
Well, let's say me.
Councilman Cindy Johnson. I don't know. Some council person does this and violates his or her code and says, well, that's nice. I signed that, but I don't care.
And that's fine. You know, and that's, you know, I think the remedies are censure, ask to resign. And then that person, though, I think that sets a bar where that person would be able to say that, hey, you know what? That's nice. I signed it. You know what? Screw you. I don't care. And there's nothing you can do other than, I think that gives the rest of the council the ability to say, listen, we all signed this code of conduct. You obviously violated. You know, you said you would resign if you did something so egregious or repetitive. If you don't want to, that's fine. But just so you know, this is something we all bought into the day that we were sworn in.
Okay.
Okay.
I put notes in on both sides of it. I think that's something that we're going to get Carl to weigh in on, because Jonathan, I understand what you're saying, and Tony, I certainly understand what you're saying as well. And as a lawyer, I guess I would be concerned about whether we could put something in the code that may be illegal, because you can't. It's the voters that remove people. So, but
well, no, it's you can remove yourself as well. It's not just the voters. You can resign.
And Jonathan, you were right about Steve King. You know, Congress, I think in the Senate, it's 2/3. I don't know what it is in the House, but they can vote to expel a member. But since House of Representatives, since they're up every 2 years, it doesn't happen a lot. And I think it's happened like 15 times in the United States Senate, but they certainly have that power. The charter hasn't given us that power. So to change, I'm just concerned that you're not saying that, you're just saying, here's your agreement. If you break it, fine, but that doesn't make you a very nice person, right?
Well, and I think this is also a personal code of conduct. This is,
right,
here's how I, as a person, am going to operate as a part of a team of people that is charged with the leadership of this community. And I think that by signing something, you know, even if it doesn't have the legal teeth, you are still having to acknowledge that this is the standard by which I'm going to operate with morally and ethically, along with the rest of my city councilors. And if I break that, then I am offering, at least at the time I signed it, I am offering, to resign. And whether I do or not, I mean, politicians make campaign promises all the time that they break. And it's up to the people to hold them accountable to that or not.
Oh, that never happens.
No new
Okay.
tax.
Tongue in cheek. So Jonathan and Tony both just kind of go back to paragraph A of the sanction section. I don't know if this covers what you're trying to do, Jonathan. I just want to remind you that that's in paragraph A. So.
Well, again, I would like to get Carl's take on this, and maybe even CML's, because I think, even that in paragraph A where it says should resign.
Yeah.
Well, that's squishy. I like shalls more than shoulds in general, because it's more definitive.
Okay. But my argument is going to continue to be that there is not a mechanism in the charter to remove a council person short of the recall by the people.
And I don't think that's in debate. I think we all agree with that, Tony.
Okay. But
Okay.
you're trying to put a precondition. Well, if you do something bad, you're promising to resign. And if you don't, shame on you.
No, we could go on and on about this.
Can we move on? Can we
Yeah.
move on?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So now what is H? If a violation of the code of conduct by mayor, whoops, I'm sorry, I actually skipped some. Let me go back up here. So there's F here. This is this section. If it's by appointees, this is really dealing with the boards and commissions. And I think we have the code probably provides this, may not even need this, but we might want to have it in the code of conduct. So let's say that John Q. Public joins the Transportation Commission and is constantly disruptive of the Transportation Commission because he believes that all cars ought to be banned from American roads and everybody should walk or ride a bike. And that's all I do. Every meeting come in and say that over and over and over again, and they disrupt the Transportation Commission meeting. We should be able to have the right to remove them from that position. And that's a violation of the code of conduct. So
I believe that we're able to do that, Charlie, already, but I don't think that it's a bad thing to have in this, because again, our boards and commissions, I mean, this to me is more of a council document.
Yeah. So
I could go either way with taking it out or keeping it in, but
I've got a section where this applies to boards and commissions, up above. So, that's why I put this in here. And I think it's just a good thing for the boards and commissions to realize, I cannot recall any meeting of a board and commission I've been in, and I've been in lots of them both before I was on the council and since, where I think that a board and commission member ever got close to this, but there could be that egregious conduct thing. So anyway, okay. Then H, whoops, got below that. H is if Jonathan does something, then Shelley would take over. Just a procedural point. I don't think there'd be any problem with that.
no, I think that's fine.
And then I put I in, and again, might be something I'll talk to Carl about, but this gets into administrative remedies and things like that. If somebody wants to appeal a decision, there's a rule called Rule 106A, which is various things that people can do if they think a government has done something wrong, and usually requires exhaustion of all administrative remedies. So if the city council votes, the next remedy is the court. I don't want to put that in here, but I want to make this to be a final decision. That's why that was something I added. I didn't see that in other codes. Any questions or concerns?
No, but I do have, potentially one point of conversation, and Rick, you're being awfully quiet. You're making me a little weirded out here.
Oh, I'm thinking here. Yeah, I would just say that this section 10 here, X to some of us, but 10 Roman numeral, that might be something that would be like a standalone document. I mean, it doesn't seem to fit the flow here. It does set out some expectations, and maybe that's something else that someone might sign too. And that's just a comment. I mean, I can live with it in there. That's not a big problem. But I had like a couple of other comments. I'm just kind of pondering on the whole thing, on the gestalt here.
By the way, Rick, just so our record's clear, what you referred to as Roman numeral X is actually 8. And this is where I was adding stuff and just screwed up my outline, because this is where I convert from word perfect to word. So it's actually section 8 of the code of conduct, the sanction section.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
all
well,
right.
that's something that might even go first, something like that too, because
Sanction section.
it kind of sets a high bar, and I think that's what we're wanting to do, but the other comments I'd make, if you're ready for them, Charlie.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. I think that we might want to be a little bit more specific up ahead. And I've got some ideas there, but before I go there, what happens if we have in the future a counselor that says, gosh, I'd really like to be able to do all of this, but I've got this sort of Americans with Disability Act disability. And I'm not able to always be in control of myself during these meetings. And, I really want to participate, but occasionally I may be, sort of out of control or like a jack in a box or I may be disruptive, but it's not anything I'm really trying to do. And your knowledge, Charlie, and Tony too, as attorneys, does that have a place in this code of conduct?
Were you saying if someone had like Tourette's syndrome or something and couldn't
Right.
control their,
Right.
or narcolepsy or something?
Well, yeah, that too.
Oh,
Or just had like low blood sugar if they're diabetic, and sometimes people get a little funky when that happens too.
Right.
and I am diabetic. So, which I have to go take my medicine, so I'm going to leave the screen for a second. But I think, Charlie, that would go without saying that people, but I don't know if Charlie wants to include that, but I think, if someone had a disability, I think everyone would be understanding of that.
Yeah, I would
But
hope.
the low blood sugar, like I need a Snickers bar and I'm yelling at you, Jonathan, and you're like, here, have some M&M, feel better. I don't know that that's the same as having some problem where I blurt out things because I can't control because of like a Tourette syndrome thing.
So Rick, I put it in here, just kind of a footnote for me to, maybe I can come up with some language. I understand what you're talking about. So we say,
Yeah.
this might not be the right place for it, but just put it in there.
Well, I mean, I don't want to have us be put in a position of requiring a doctor's note or anything like that either, kind of post hoc. But it may be something that might come up at some point, and I just wanted to throw that out. So if I can, Charlie, I'd like to go back to page 4 of 10. And, I think that we've hit on some of these conduct codes. And
Just really looking at Rick.
well, and I would suggest that we have a number 7 in there, right after your number 6. And that would include the stuff that we talked about last week, which may need some wordsmithing, may not be perfect language, but give some real examples of what we're talking about in a bullet point or lowercase alpha presentation that would say, the use of unreasonably or loud, disruptive language. B, the making of loud or disruptive noise. C, the engaging in violent or distracting action. D, leaving one's seat to engage in private conversations with staff or members of the
Excuse me,
public.
speaking about leaving my seat, I have a smoke alarm going off in my house. I'll be right back.
Oh, no. Hope it's okay.
I
So
hope there's not another fire in South Glenwood, Charlie.
Yeah. So Rick, I'm on page 4, but I'm not following where in here.
Okay.
So,
Well,
didn't see that.
Charlie, if you'd like, I could share this screen, my screen, but you'd have to bump out of yours for just a little bit.
it's yours.
Okay. And let me share. this. And, but this is what we talked about last week when we were having our fun. And so I mentioned these sort of bullet points, and I think this comes from the town in Washington that we talked about. But I just wonder if it might advantage everybody and provide a little bit clearer sort of guardrails or directions if people, saw more explicitly in a bullet format some of the behaviors that we're prescribing as a no-no. And
Okay, and now see if you want to put it in the code too. So, okay, just so I wasn't following what you said. So, yeah, I mean, I got no problem with being specific. My original goal in drafting this was to have it 4 pages.
yeah,
I don't know if I'm going to get there, and the reason for that is we could have two laminated sheets with
Right.
the 4 pages on it. But if we have 6, maybe we can do it that way too. So and some of this is going to come out because some of this will probably go to procedures and I have some Washington code and other places too. But if you want to send it to me, Rick, I have add from Rick in my draft now. So, but I don't, if anybody else, I mean, I'm fine with. By the way, our sergeant at arms, I was mentioned earlier, usually has been the police chief, is the sergeant at arms, and we might want to think about.
Charlie, the police chief, or sometimes he can't attend. So like Lieutenant Hassel or Lieutenant, one of the, or a sergeant would be there.
right.
The officer who's there.
So Rick, anyway, I wrote into my version, add from Rick. So if you want to send it over to me, I can put that in.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Paragraph
Okay.
7. Okay. I'm fine adding that in.
Well, and then, as I think about this list and I think about free speech, I certainly am respectful of what Tony said about, impinging on somebody's ability to make an argument, somebody's ability to make an observation in public. I think we need to be sure that we're not, so prescriptive here that we're not allowing that. But again, I think that there's a difference between a disagreement kind of artfully stated and one that's sort of, like in your face and interruptive and combative. So I don't know that we can fix that here, but I just wanted to say that, that I agree with Tony that free speech is really critical. I'm wondering
Let me just-
also,
Let me just interject for a second, Rick. What we talked about last meeting a little bit, and I did change the language somewhere here. I put, can't argue with members of the public. I put, should not become argumentative. I thought that was a good change, and that's
yeah,
somewhere in this code now. So there's other places for that. I can think about adding that too.
Okay.
I'm not thinking about it, I can figure out how to add it.
yeah, okay, yeah, and I think that would be good, but I'm wondering if we know that a council member, in the spirit of what I just said, is out sort of rabble rousing and getting, a certain segment of their base sort of fired up to come and sort of harass the council. Whether that's something that we could, artfully talk about here, or perhaps that's just all in the realm of free speech and free America, and that's fine. But
And Rick, I guess I would say that, yeah, I mean, oh, and by the way, just in the future, if you ever have a 10 and 12-year-old and you say, just put some chicken nuggets in the oven and see what happens, maybe not a great idea.
Did you call the fire department?
I did not. No, the fire department has not been to my house today. No, and I would say, again, this document is not meant to subvert free speech, the First Amendment rights, our city code, or our city charter. This is just I think we're trying to make this so encompassing to not, potentially step on people's free will and free rights and God-given this and whatever. This is just something that we're asking people to sign on to and say, I will, again, exhibit this behavior. I will act in this manner. And so if it is whatever we say it is, and again, knowing that we don't have the ability, and if the future council person goes, wow, and I for example, I have a lease I have tenants who live in my basement in an apartment. And my lease is crazy long because every time somebody does something stupid, I put it in the lease. And I say to the tenants every time, the new tenants that come, you're going to do something stupid. I don't know what it is, but the lease is going to get like 2 more paragraphs long because of something you do that's weird. And I don't want this to become a 20-page
Right.
document over 20 years. But I do think that for the purpose of this conversation, if we say we should not, if we disagree with the direction that the direction a majority of council is going, for example, 7th Street, Rick, you and I disagreed with the direction the majority of council was going at that time. I think we absolutely should put in, it's just my opinion, that we should put in this document, this code of ethics, that we can have our voice as a private citizen to talk to people. We should have our voice as a leader of the community within the realm of meetings and work sessions to say, I don't agree with this. Heck, if we feel strongly enough, we could write a letter to the editor expressing as a member of the body, I even don't like that. But I think what you're saying is, if I were to have gone around and try to, go behind not go behind council's back, but rile up a bunch of people to come and, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't seem like it's a really healthy thing for this council to do. I mean, if people come to us, I guess, and this is just personal opinion and people can disagree with me, I'm not set in stone on this, but if people come to us and say, I don't like what this is going on, I don't like this, I think it's, well, come to the next meeting, here's when it is. That
Right.
feels different than us going out and recruiting people and calling people and, saying, you need to come here and you need to tell this person what you think and accuse this person of this, and you need to take this information and use it against that person. That to me does not feel ethical. But saying to a citizen, I agree with you, I did not agree with the council, and if you want to have your voice heard, here's when we do it. If you think that that's infringing on people's free speech too much, that's fine. I just think that it's probably a ethical and normative behavior to at least discuss.
So I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in. I'm not so sure I agree with what Jonathan, you or Rick said in that, because I think that, if I think that an issue comes before council and I have a pretty good sense that I'm the only one, or maybe I and Tony are the only ones that believe that, and we want to get a group of citizens to come in to try to convince the city council to do A, B, and C, that I shouldn't be prohibited from asking these people to come and support the view because they agree with what I think. So we got to be careful there. I understand what you're trying to avoid. On the other hand, I think we got to be careful about basic rights of us to get people to petition for redress of grievances, which is also a constitutional principle. So sometimes we just got to take the heat. If we're proposing something as a council that, and we're dealing with an issue now, we all know what it is, that people don't agree with, we just have to take the heat. If the people are going to come in and say, I don't want to do that, and I don't agree with you, and we have to say, thank you, we appreciate that, but we're going to do that anyway. That's our job as council members, to make decisions that we think are in the public interest.
I would agree, but I think, Charlie, there's also a line, if taking 7th Street as an example, saying, Mike Gamba, and this is not at all truth. This is just if Mike Gamba is watching, I'm just making this up a whole in cloth. But if I were to have gone to somebody and said, I disagree with our priorities on 7th Street, and you know what? How Mike Gamba is in bed with Mark Gould, and they're both these kind of peoples, and and then I were to go out and get people based on false information, innuendo, and attacking a member of council personally. That is not about regret or redressing our grievance. That feels out of the bounds of, and what this document's for. It's for council norms and ethics, and I think that would fall outside of that. So I don't know if we're getting too into the weeds, but yeah, I know that kind of stuff can happen and does happen all the time, and attacking people personally and using surrogates to attack people personally is
the personal attacks shouldn't happen for the public or from any council member to the other council members. I agree.
I understand.
If
But
somebody comes in and disagrees about the face mask issue, for instance, they can come in and say it, but they can't say, Mr. Mayor, I think you have blah, blah, blah about the face mask.
no, but I'm specifically saying that
Sorry.
when somebody, no problem. If you can handle a smoke alarm going off, I can handle a barking dog if you want to mute yourself.
Alarm, it's a dog thing.
I just want to say though, a council person using a member of the public as a surrogate to make a personal attack on another city councilor is different than what you're saying, Charlie.
I agree. But that, to me, that I don't care whether some council member got it to do it or not. Remember, the public comes in and starts attacking a single council member for his or her position. We don't allow, I don't think that's part of that public, process. And they come in and say, I don't agree with the council, what they're doing, but the comments from the public ought to be addressed to council as a whole, even though it may be clear they're really talking about Charlie Willman's view on something.
But one thing, Charlie, so I agree with that, but let's say it's face mask, just to use that as an example. And a bunch of people in the community are against it, and they call me and I go, well, come to the meeting, and if you guys all speak, maybe you can convince the rest of council that this is a bad idea, and I help organize that. I don't think that's a bad thing. But if I said, come to the council and call Charlie a fat, poorly dressed lawyer, that's not appropriate.
Hey, it's a great tie.
I
think you and Jonathan are both agreeing, I think.
No, I am agreeing with him. No. Okay. Write it down.
Well, so maybe we could have a clause that says councilors will not personally attack one another, nor will they knowingly ask
Enlist.
others to do so.
Yeah, I think something like that is what I'm getting at. I think, Rick.
Okay.
And again, unless we have specifically a email from me to a member of the public saying, here's what you need to do to, when you come and give a public comment, unless there's like a smoking gun, we can't prove it. But again, not everything about this has to be provable in a court of law. This is a standard that, again, we are going to, and the next council and councils beyond us will ascribe to. So whether people follow it or not, that's their own ethics.
So let me go back to this. I just shared.
Yeah, can you share your screen? Yeah, I don't see your screen. I just see us right now.
There we go. So going back to this gets into this section that we talked about before. Actually right there. And maybe some difference in the language there. I don't know, but that's kind of what I was trying to get to is in pardon? Yeah. I got to play with this because when I'm doing it like this, I can't remember the full context, but I'll remember as I do the next draft. Is that kind of what you're talking about? What I just added there? Okay.
And so what I did, so we don't forget, Charlie, is I added it to that list that you were looking at on the screen. So we got it both places.
Yeah, you were.
I mean, we don't need it in both places is my point.
I know. So, yeah, right here, Rick, is where you were adding that stuff. And that's why I put in. I can compare what you had on your screen to mine. So, all right. I think we got off track a little bit. Let me, and Rick, I'm not critical of that, but do we have anything else on sanctions that we wanted to do? Because I think that's where we were. And I just want to cover one other thing before we go beyond sanctions. Then let's go back and look generally through the code of conduct and see if there's anything else we want to change. I've made some changes. We've been going along here. So anything else on these general sanctions here? It looks like I got some page break issues here, but I think we covered all those. I put this Washington code in here. Maybe this is a place we it's just here's some other procedural ways of doing this. I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at these. And I just thought if you want to look at them quickly, if you see anything jumps out and grabs you, I might try to incorporate some of this into the sanctions section above to try to make sure we got all the procedures done. Because here's, like, for instance, this kind of what I have in, but it just then it goes into A, B, and C. And I think it might be included. I tried to make a comparison. Yeah, you can see here if it's outside the outside the scope. So it may already be in there. I don't know. Just if anybody wants to take a look at that outside this meeting, if you see anything in there you want me to grab, let me know. Then this personal responsibility section, this might address some of the stuff you guys were just talking about. I can't remember which code I took this from, but this is a direct cut and paste from somebody else's code. Understand the committee expects to serve with dignity and respect, be an agent of the democratic process, avoid actions that might cause public to question my independent judgment. Not use my office of resource for personal political gain. I'm a public steward I'm a prudent steward of public resources. Do we want to have an aspirational statement at the beginning, or do you think it's duplicitous?
I mean, I think an aspirational statement, like, I mean, I think I keep saying, and maybe I'm the only one, so, you know, strike me down if the majority of you folks don't agree with me, but I think something saying this is, you know, Rick, I think adding the ethics part is good. And I think this is something that we all have sort of scribed to. This sets the bar, the basic bar, not like an aspirational we should strive to. Like, this is the bottom bar that we should all strive to clear, knowing that this doesn't have significant legal remedy or legal weight, but it's something that we're all going to sign on to because it's how we want to treat each other and how we want to represent this body to the public, or something fluffy like that, that I think that details what we're trying to accomplish with this.
Okay. So let me, if you're okay with it, let me think about where to put this, and it might be a
Okay
preamble.
with that part.
Pardon?
I'm okay. I feel like I'm one of those, like, you're drafting the Declaration of Independence and I'm
Yeah, I know.
bound and determined to stay with England. So you can put in whatever you want. I'm going to vote against it. But I'm happy with that language and I'm willing to be convinced.
Okay. All right. So let me go back to the top here. I added something about signing conduct here. And maybe the purpose is where we'll get the expectations. I might put those two things together. And that's really not, the purpose of the code is kind of good because somebody who has to interpret it, they always look at what's the purpose of passing the code. That's why it's there from a legal standpoint. And then general rules, I think we went through all these. I want to get there. Sections I was writing on paper before I got into it. So, oh yeah, some of the changes here. We talked about attendance at meetings. Where is that? Oh yeah, so it starts right here in responsibilities. Shall attend all regular special meetings and work sessions. This is supposed to be deleted. Because I put this down here. So this is what I added. I put 10%. I think that's what I got. I had different notes, but if we missed more than 10% of council work sessions, what I try to do is put it in a time frame. So I had like in a calendar quarter. Does that, this section here is new. That meet we think we talked about at the council meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Some of these need to be combined, but I haven't combined them yet.
Yeah, and again, I think this is something that if you were a brand new city council person, would you look at that? You know, does it pass a sniff test? Would you go like, yeah, that seems like something I should be able to do?
Yeah. And the red line you see here are changes that made today. So gender decorum, again, there's some changes in wording in here, but that's from the last meeting. Yeah, here's another, no personal
Yeah,
attacks.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
So
If we could just add, or cause anybody else to do the same, something like that.
yeah. Third parties is legal language, I'll change it, but it reminds me what we're talking about when I redraft. It's very unintelligent language. But I'll work on it. Okay. This is a kind of that personal code of conduct kind of thing during the meetings and stuff. Then Rick, here, I'll add that section you talked about. So let me go here as this interactions with staff. I was really having a hard time with this. And somebody, I think, Rick, you mentioned that in the Washington code, that Hubbard code you referred to had these things. I actually like, frankly, the Washington stuff better.
Which part of it, Charlie? I'm sorry.
Starts from here down rather than what I put up here. This is kind of my commingling of various other codes, but I thought this was a kind of a pretty good statement about staff. So let me just run through it. Treat as professionals, clear, honest communication, live in contact with specific staff. This Deborah floating around out there, I can't see her on my screen, but she is kind of what I was trying to come up with is something that, you direct it, you can talk to staff, but you can't interfere, no disruption of staff in their jobs. Never publicly criticize an individual employee. That's more to give to Deborah. Administrative functions, don't get involved in administrative functions of the city. Check with city staff and correspondence before taking action. Don't attend meetings of city staff unless requested by staff. This idea, if you're there, it implies something by it. Limited request for personal staff support. I just thought this one I did not have in there at all, but I think this is, you don't want to put staff in a tough position. Well, you're going to support me for this next election, aren't you? And you're going to write a letter as my support. Because the implication is if you don't, you probably won't be working for the city anymore. So I think that's a good ad. But I actually, unless somebody has some problem with that Washington code section, I think that's better than what I wrote.
And Charlie, what I had there was I took that CRSA language about interjecting, and it just reads, under no circumstances will a city council member interject herself or himself in the details of hiring, training, evaluating, supervising, managing, or disciplining city employees. The council is a body sets personnel policy at a high level for the entire city, including goals and priorities, but shall not engage in micromanagement.
Okay, so because I don't have that, I know you got your screen, I'm sharing mine again. I've added down here. You talk about CIRSA, the
The CIRSA.
So, why don't you send that to me and let me look at that. That makes sense.
Okay.
I think you mentioned at the last meeting and I couldn't figure out what you were talking about. I read the CIRSA stuff that I have here on my desk and I didn't make sense of that. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
And Charlie, I agree with all that, but I want to distinguish from someone running for office or someone who is in office. I don't work for the city of Glenwood Springs.
You
Someone
do.
being just generally critical of how the government is being run is not being critical of an individual staff person, but saying there's too many people there, they spend too much money, their priorities are off. And I know that those, you would say, well, those criticisms go to the city manager because she's in charge. But I think people can be generally critical of government without being critical of individual staff.
Right.
Right, thank you.
I said, put general criticism exception, Tony, up there. Let me look at that. Okay. I understand what you're saying. I consider the freedom of speech issues that you talked about earlier. Good point. So I think, if I skipped anything here, no. This section here, I think the section 4, duty of public, I think that's got to go in the procedural section, the code, the rules of procedure for council meetings. It probably will not end up here. But I left it in because we talked about the city council meeting. This is Jonathan, you talked about, or I think it was your comment, Jonathan, do we apply this to the boards and commissions? I think we have it there. I don't think it's ever going to really come up, but it's there in case we need it.
Well, and it has come up, but it's never come up to where it's been a public issue. Usually there's an issue and that person has been asked to resign, and they do. So, and we can, this is not, boards and commissions serve at our leisure. They're not, boy, that sounds douchey. At our leisure, they serve at our will. So we appoint them. We can also unappoint them. I don't know if they need to be in this code of conduct, because if there's an issue with somebody showing up to meetings drunk, we absolutely can hear from other commission members or board members. This is an issue. We can't have this guy or gal be on our commission anymore, or high or whatever, or impaired in some way. I think that would be an easy thing to say, like hypothetically, you know what, you need to get off this board. And so I think that I don't know that we need to apply this to boards and commissions. I guess I would just leave boards and commissions out of this altogether. Because we're not going to, I don't know. I mean, and again, like, leave it in there enough for, I guess, the rest of council to maybe have a larger conversation about it.
Okay. That's kind of why I wrote the comment I just did.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm fine if we leave it in, but let's put a pin in it, because I guess my vote would be that we take this out. But I don't feel strongly enough that if the majority of council wants to leave it in, that we can't. I would say, going back to, I think, items 8, Charlie, I got a little distracted by fire alarms and such, but we don't actually have a provision for, we talk a bit, I don't think we do. We talk about, you shouldn't text, you shouldn't be doing personal work during meetings, blah, blah, blah. But I don't believe we actually have anything that says don't come drunk or high to a meeting. I mean, I should go without saying. But
Sorry.
are you
I wanna
drunk
come-
right now, Tony?
No, I'm just calling. I was laughing at what you were saying, because I was thinking of coming high or drunk or both to the next meeting. But you're right. I mean, but that should maybe be included, but that would be a behavioral thing, right? If you were drunk or high.
Well, no, I don't think necessarily. It could be, but if you're high, you're just sitting there like a bump on the log, but you're not able to. Some people, I've heard, I've seen movies, but some people, would say that if you are in some way compromised mentally, you're not able to participate as a member of the body. And I think if there's suspicion that, usually I would think we could call a recess, say, hey, you smell like booze. It's time you leave. Let's not make this a big deal. But I think we should, yeah, there we go. Not be intoxicated.
Yeah, it may not be the right place, but that's where I picked up right now. I just rolled back up and it might be, actually, you want to put up above, but I just added that. So, okay. All right. So on the boards and commissions, let me get back down to that. Let me look. I thought I had it. I have the summary of the code in front of me, and I don't have anything in my notes about that. All I have is it's conduct of meetings under 030.110. Says board and commissions meetings are conducted the same, excepting as pertains to preparing the agenda. So I don't remember what the code said, but I'll have to take a look back at that. So let me see about that removal of boards and commissions. Maybe that takes care of it on its own. So, all right. We've already talked about executive sessions. So I'm kind of running back through this unless there's something else. I think we've covered everything again. Anything else in the that anybody has in the code of conduct, either in front of them or Rick, other comments? I know you went through this really thoroughly, so other things we should add that you think?
You know, Charlie, I made some like small typo checks and some grammar suggestions that aren't substantive. As you would expect, I would, right? But so
Absolutely.
I'll just button those up and email them to you.
Yeah, just send me a red line with those in them, and then I can really easily cut and paste them into this.
And
Excellent.
Charlie, can I send you a couple of minor notes too?
Oh, absolutely. Anybody, any red lines, any of the three of you have wording or something else that just sounds wordy or doesn't make sense, please send it to me, because, you know, I read this and I try to take some time in between when I'm reading it, so that I don't end up, you know, putting garbage in there. So, but it's still, I read it and it doesn't always say what I think I'm reading. So feel free to give me comments like that. Absolutely. Or any other comments for that matter.
Okay.
So are you all, sorry, I just got a text message from my daughter, and my granddaughter dislocated her finger. So
Oh, no.
I'll deal with that in a minute. So let me bring up again.
It's a very dramatic evening.
I know, dogs barking, fires, and
Okay, so let me, if you guys don't mind, I don't think it'll take us long, but let's just kind of look at this Bob's Rules of Order and see what you guys think in general, and then let me take a stab at it coming up with something. General rules during meetings. And most of this, if you read it, is stuff we already do, but it's nice to have it in front of us. Except in raising a point of order, point of information, a point of appeal, and those things are addressed later in this document. You must be recognized by the chair. That's kind of what we do, but get to have it. Time limit, 5 minutes. We use 3. We need to amend our code. Does everybody agree on to say 3?
Well, you know, and so this is a question I have, Charlie, as well, is because, you know, I describe it as people taking second and third bites at the apple. You know, if there's some issue that comes before us, we talk, and yes, three should be enough time for us all to get our main point across without duplicating anybody else. But then somebody inevitably says something towards the end, and then somebody I need to respond to that. Now, does that go to their 3-minute limit, or do they get the clock again? And especially with something that's fairly contentious or involved, you might have somebody asking 5 minutes of questions of staff, having public comment, that person doing their 3 minutes, then spending 3 minutes to respond to somebody else, and then doing and just one last thing before we take the vote, because then we have the motion, you know, so now somebody's maybe commenting on the motion. And it doesn't happen a lot, but I've just seen it happen enough where somebody could kind of and they don't mean to filibuster, they just feel passionate about a subject. And I'm like example A of this, but sometimes people just can go on and on and on 2 or 3 times. So does that 3 minutes apply to each time they speak, or a totalitarian Rick, help me out.
Does it apply to the way you normally do things? Is that what you want to know?
Right. Yes, exactly. And maybe something like 3 minutes, not to exceed 5 minutes total, you know, that, you know, and again, it's a guideline, and, you know, they should ask for additional time if they want to continue a point. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, hang on a second. I'm trying to get track changes here. So I'm going to type it as, it's a good point, Jonathan. Second bite at apple. I thought it was, you saw me scrolling. I thought it was in here, but I couldn't find it.
And I guess I would say we should allow people to respond to new information, new comments, or new point of views. But, you know, and again, I'm fine with doing whatever. But if we do you get 3 minutes initially, and for no topics, should your comments exceed 5 minutes in total? I think
this is what I was trying to remember. It was right below where we were talking, and I forgot to look down. Is that sufficient, or do you think we need more in that wording?
Well, I think that's sufficient, Charlie. But again, I think you and we all have seen it comes back, I do the whole, thank you, public, we'll now close public comment. We'll bring it back for further discussion and or motion. And if that motion doesn't come until 3 or 4 people have their say, people might do the 3 minutes, then the motion's made, and now we're commenting on the motion. And I think, people do, depending on what the topic is, people will either jump out with a motion really quick, or sometimes, like myself, I want to hear some input from the rest of city council before I might craft a motion. So I think both are valid.
Okay,
I don't know,
So-
Rick, Tony, what do you think about that?
no, sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. And then I agree because, it's like, Charlie, I was thinking of a rebuttal and a surrebuttal in
Right.
court. I make my argument, you make your argument, you rebut, you have the burden, you get the final word, and then we're done. You can't just keep going back and forth or it's never ending. So I agree with that.
But that's a binary. There's 2 parties here where there's 7 parties.
Right. But so each party, Jonathan, gets their time,
Yeah.
but then I go, oh, one more thing. And you go, you know what, Tony, a motion's been made. It's been seconded by Paula. We've had our discussion, vote on the motion. And if you want to vote no or yeah, that's my time to have my ultimate comment on it. Right. But to keep inserting more little things, we could discuss it forever. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's incumbent on the person leading the meeting to follow those rules of order that make it clear that, you've spoken, you've had your time to speak. You maybe have a little, if another issue comes up, you can rebut that. But that's
Tony, you're cutting
it,
in and
then you're
out.
done.
Tony, I think your internet was giving you trouble. You were cutting it out.
Sorry, I'm breaking up.
No, not your fault. Just wanted you to know. So you want to repeat the last part of that?
Right. So anyhow, I was saying that, Charlie, that you just get your one time to talk and then maybe a little quick thing after that, but that's it. I don't know.
Okay, so what I added here, if you can see the screen, is second bite of apple, application for second comments regarding new information, new comments, not repetitive, which is kind of what you say from the dais, Jonathan, but maybe we can put it, let me see if there's some way I can try to take what you guys have said, because I agree with everything you guys have said, just how we write it, so.
Yeah.
And basically, chair controls. And there's some up above that talks about the general idea, you're the parliamentarian, you're the one that runs the show.
Well, and I guess just in general, and I'm looking for guidance as the chair of the meeting on these things. So I'm probably more interested in this than most. But I think in the past, yes, you give people 3 minutes of the public to make a comment, but we had a situation where I can't remember who it was, but they came and they just kept talking and talking. But it was like the person who literally 40 years ago or 50 years ago designed the park. And like, I'm going to give you an extra 90 seconds because you're the dude 50 years ago that designed this park. I'm going to give you, I didn't apply the rules fairly. I understand that. But I also think when we're talking with council, if there's a subject that is absolutely near and dear to somebody's heart and they need to be heard because, maybe they ran their campaign on this. Maybe this is something that they're, particularly passionate about, having a little bit of flexibility to allow people to go over that 3 minutes, I think is at least I appreciate it.
No, and I just added discretion of mayor to extend that
Yeah.
up in that other paragraph. So the next thing I want to kind of cover is all motions, and this is where I think we sometimes get helter-skelter. Jonathan, again, it's a control issue from the chair, and it's real easy to sit back and criticize, but it's not easy always to do. But somebody makes a motion, the next thing is there a second. If there's not, then there's no debate on that motion. And sometimes we get into long discussions. So it's got to be in I think it's in some other comments here and how you do things, but you make the motion, you're not commenting. You can make a comment, say, therefore I make the motion to blah, 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 and you stop. You don't go on the reason for making the motion, because that's where we get these problems with the wording of the motion and everything else. And then you say, is there a second to that motion? And maybe we got to just repeat the motion for the benefit of Catherine and also for the record. So when she gets back trying to do minutes, she gets it right. I consistently find things in the motion, I'm not blaming Catherine at all, because it's real tough to do, but I'll read a motion, well, that's not what the motion was about. And I try to read those things carefully, and I send the comments to Deborah and she passed them on to Catherine. And Catherine's always great at calling back and saying, yeah, you know, you're right or no, you're wrong. This is exactly what was said. So I just think we need to watch that. This is the chairman's discretion up here that I think we're talking about, but I'll make sure that it's tied into everything else.
Yeah,
In
no,
voting-
I think that's exactly what I was looking for.
So voting requirements, you know, and this gets into stuff we talked about the other day. And again, this is, if we get this, there's some stuff that's in the code of conduct probably come out. You got to vote. And this may not apply.
Unless you have a conflict.
I read this and it's been a while since I read this 4 or 5 days ago. I'm trying to remember exactly what it says. I'm not as familiar with this. Anyway, okay, we just need to make this consistent. But the guy that wrote this is the city attorney out of Centennial, and he is considered the state expert on procedural stuff. This is an A or nay. You got to vote A or nay on things, unless there's a conflict of interest. Can't abstain. You can't, when you're voting, and we don't do this because we do the way we do roll call in the dais, we press buttons, but it's more, I think it's been violated a couple times during these virtual meetings. We start talking about I'm voting no and blah blah blah. In fact, I voted no on something the last council meeting. Going, damn it, I should have commented on that before because I can't really comment now. I don't think it's appropriate. But
I'm sorry, give me an example of that, Charlie.
This here.
Yeah.
So let's say that we're taking like we're doing right now. Catherine asked for votes. She comes, Charlie Wellman, how do you vote on that? Well, I'm going to vote no, but I'm voting no because I don't believe that this issue is here.
We're actually taking roll call.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So when you're doing it, it's the vote, nothing more. That's what that means. That
So
makes
you're not
sense?
saying when it comes to discussion, when it's your turn, like
Yeah.
you did this about the face mask. You said, I'm going to vote no because I want to see this 30 days, not indefinitely. So I'll be a no vote on this. Like, that's fine, correct?
Yeah, I said that before we took the vote, and then
Yes.
I voted no. That's
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Just
So
want
it's
to
in the
clarify.
comments before the vote. In the actual vote, you can't explain the vote, and that's what this is saying. The way it's worded.
Would
And
that
I'll look-
include, Charlie, I'm voting no for this, but I really would vote yes, if not for the fact that the sky is blue today and I think it should be green.
You
know,
gotta do
kind of
that.
explanation
You got to do
goes-
the comments. I'm sorry, Tony interrupted. I
Yeah,
apologize.
you got to do that before, right?
Right, right. Yeah. So when in these verbal votes we're taking, when they come to Hershey, you got to say yes or no. You know, you don't
Right.
get to explain anything else then, because that's almost getting what we talked about before. You start to get argumentative, you know, because you know you're the minority. You want to get your position. I'm not picking on you again on this, Tony, because I was in the minority in a couple of things, and I thought, oh, I should have explained what I was doing, but it was too late for me to do that. So,
And I don't know if we want to put it in there, if that's getting too far in the weeds, but when we feel strongly about things, I'm pretty sure all of us have done, well, I'll just say, I'll speak for myself. I know I have something I feel very good about. I'll be like a hell yes, or you know, certainly no, you know. That's not good either. I think maybe we should even put something in there, a simple yes or no, because most of the time it's electronically. Our votes are recorded electronically when we get back together. And I think we should try to stick to that decorum of just yes or just no.
okay,
And it should be said.
all right.
But Jonathan, you're right. And the time for saying that is, Charlie makes a motion, I second it, and then Rick says, I'm going to be opposing this motion because blah,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Right. That's the time. That's the hell yes or hell no time, but not when Catherine's taking roll. It is either yes
Right.
or no.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Okay,
Okay.
Rick, anything you had? You look like you were going to say something. Oh, okay. All right. So then you get into this is the chairman's duties, and so this is Robert's Rules of Order modified to Bob's Rules of Order. But you're the chair, you direct it, you're the parliamentarian. One of the problems with Robert's Rules of Order, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we were talking about this, is they're so complex that if you're really good at this, and I mentioned this last meeting, so I won't repeat it again, but I will repeat it again. I was really good at this. Boy, I could move meetings in the way I wanted to move it just because people didn't know what we were doing. So anyway, the simpler the better. Jonathan, I haven't spent a lot of time looking through these, so this might be something where you want to look at. If you see something that from a mayor standpoint and now having your experience, is this right? Does this work? Or do you need to change it? Maybe send me those comments. Or anybody else, but I've just mentioned Jonathan because you see it from a different perspective than us that's sitting down the dais from you.
Yeah, and I think I just think things that I struggle with, like this all looks fine as far as us, but I do struggle with, do we want to, and I think we've had this conversation, when people give public comment, we don't in real time respond, is that, but we've kind of loosened that off. If somebody comes and says, boy, there's a fire hydrant spewing water right now on 12th Street. Like, I think that's something where we would not wait. We would probably say, hey, Deborah, do you mind, directing somebody to kind of go over and take a look at that? That might be good. I don't think she would probably wait for us to give that direction, but we've kind of let off on that. So I guess I'm always kind of searching, and I guess it doesn't need to be in this Bob's rule of order, but I guess I would like to say to at least you three, if there are times when you don't see me fairly and consistently and equitably applying the same standard to either us or members of the public, please call a point of order. Or if there's times where, we need to have a conversation on what, especially with electronic meetings, what involves or is members of the public. Is somebody commenting from Florida about our face mask policy? Is that a member of our public? And do we need to take that comment? I don't know. But I think that it doesn't necessarily need to go into this, but at some point I would like to, and maybe it's not a big deal. And maybe this was probably a conversation we should have had a year ago, but I'm always looking for that feedback. So maybe there's something in here about points of orders to the presiding officer, about those things. I don't know. It looks good enough for me. And if I see something that I'm looking for more feedback, maybe I'll just bring it up to you guys individually.
I think there might be something later in this, Jonathan, but let's go on right now. I just put council points of order and response to comments from public.
Perfect.
This needs to be, in my view, this is still too long about moving parties privileges. Generally speaking, it sets the basic principle. So maybe we leave it in so we know. Again, remember the rules are there if we have a dispute. If there's no dispute, you don't pay any attention to them. I mean, I don't mean you ignore them, but you don't have to be calling. Well, you didn't do it under paragraph C of point 22. That just doesn't get us anywhere. Okay, so here's Jonathan, maybe what you're talking about. There's different, and I again, this is fairly complex. And I may want to make this a little less complex or make this kind of a sidebar, not really part of the point of order, but it kind of talks about different types of motions. The biggest thing here is, I think in here, which is the motion is the main motion. You make a motion to take certain action. And then there just talks about the type of motions. I don't know if we need that. A subordinate motion is a motion to amend. I thought it was in here, but when I reread this, I didn't see it. And do we want to leave? Because again, Parliament, if Robert's Rules of Order says Charlie makes a motion to give an honorarium to Charlie Wilman's daughter because she did a great thing at the pool yesterday. And then Rick amends and says, well, I agree with that, but I also give an honorarium to my granddaughter because she did this. Then Tony amends and says, I want to give an honorarium to my mother because she did this. It theoretically have a motion to amend, and that ought to be the limit, because if you don't, it becomes so convoluted what you're voting on, it's hard to follow. Does that make sense? Only allow one amendment?
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
Seems right.
Okay.
Harry, you okay? Sorry.
Okay.
Dog is barking.
Okay, now here, Jonathan, this is the section I talk about. These are points of order and stuff you were talking about a while ago. And again, I'll probably take out the example, because again, I like to have this on one 8.5, 11 sheet of paper, that two sides, and we we can go right to it. So this might be just something that we give. I think the way that Bob Wedner did this, Wiedner, I'm not sure I pronounced the last name, did this is this kind of a teaching tool as well. So I think that, and I'll chat with him. He invited me to give him a call, and I hadn't had a chance to call him, but I don't think we need the explanation, but we need to, what is a point of order? When is it appropriate? When it's not? What's a point of information? When is it appropriate? When it's not? Point of appeal, when is it appropriate? When is it not? And then these are just the types of motions. And again, we had a list of type of motions, but not go into a long explanation, maybe a 2-sentence explanation.
I think this is all good. I mean, it's there. I mean,
And
Why
what it does is it gets rid of that 500 pages of Robert's Rules of Order.
well, yeah, but going down, I think this is great. Going from 500 to 24 is a massive leap. Not most people don't come into this job knowing, even if they've been on a city board or commission or have served on a nonprofit board or a church elder group, most people aren't using Robert's Rules of Order in any form or fashion. So, your familiarity and with it is pretty unique. So I guess what I'm saying is I appreciate the 24 pages of examples and short, brief descriptions. I wouldn't want to get it down to like a 3x5 card.
No, I can't read anything that small. I'm too old.
And too blind.
Yeah, and too blind. All right.
According
So
to
what I did want to address, I was kind of running through, so I did a couple, just want to kind of point out, this is something we don't do correctly. When we postpone things or table things, it's not done correctly. So you either postpone it to a date certain, which means that we're going to talk about it at the next meeting, we're going to talk about it in the future, then that's this motion indefinitely. Typically that's called a kill motion, and you hear about kill motions in the legislature, particularly, which is I don't remember, there's a motion in the legislature to put thing on there's a term for it, I can't remember what it is, but basically it kills any motion. It's called a kill motion. But there, it could be that we're not going to know. We're not going to know when it's going to be. So you could put, well, let's table this until the first meeting in July, and then at least it goes on the agenda and says as a note from even the administration in the staff notes say, council moved to table this matter to July, first meeting in July. We're not ready to discuss it. Are you okay with, postponing it again to the first meeting in August? But then it stays in the record of what you're doing. Where if you postpone it indefinitely, basically, I moved to table this matter indefinitely. I just think you say it that way, which means that I don't ever want to talk about this again. Which is, frankly, it's impractical because any of us can bring anything up at any meeting. It has to be put on the agenda. So, okay. If that all makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just one of those things we can all just read through at our leisure. And if things
Yeah.
don't make sense, I think we have a group discussion on how we'd want to tighten up the language or if we want to remove it or whatever. But yeah, like it's funny where you stop right there, motion to amend a main motion. We've done that a couple of times, poorly, probably every time, but it's helpful. Sorry, Rick, go ahead. You have your hand up. Thank you.
Oh, no. I just put my hand up.
Oh, okay.
So, I'm just kind of wondering here with the shape of things to come, whether we might want to take these separately. And just because I'm thinking that the code of ethics is going to be sort of conduct and ethics, rather, is going to be sort of overwhelming. And Charlie, unless there was some, real big reason that we needed Bob's rules of order, we might consider having a separate discussion on that, the next meeting after. I'm just saying that, we're taking on an awful lot in a meeting, but if
So
they go hand in hand, I guess I'm good with that. So
the only reason I brought up in this meeting and would bring it up in the council meeting, and again, I'm going to try just heavy lifts, and I don't know if I can get it done by tomorrow afternoon. That's the biggest problem because that's the agenda deadline. In fact, I don't think I can get it done by tomorrow afternoon, very honestly. But the only reason I have them together is I think I need to look at this from an organizational standpoint, the way I think. It may not work for everybody else, but like in the the code of conduct, we had the public decorum during meetings or council decorum during meetings. Maybe some of those things just ought to refer to the rules of procedure. So there's just where we're going to put in what document. That's
Sure,
why,
sure.
that's why I'm talking to this group anyway about it together. I agree, Rick. If we get the code of conduct, that's going to take us a good chunk of a meeting or a significant piece of a meeting.
Well, and if the people present are okay with that, I'd be glad to try to take a look and maybe have a conversation with you, Charlie, about how best to synchronize and then bring that forward. I'm not looking for work. I'm just trying to be helpful here.
That's fine. That's fine. I've got some deadlines tomorrow. So I know I probably can't get till Friday.
Okay.
But we can put it on the agenda, and decide how we're gonna deal with it there and get it out quickly. So here's motion to continue, motion to call the question. That's actually a formal procedure. Usually, Jonathan, you say, I'm gonna call the question, you run it, but that's not under Robert's Rules of Order, or that's not an appropriate way of doing things. And this actually, if I call the question, I'm going to call the question because I'm trying to cut off debate and, I'm trying to stop Rick from saying something. We're supposed to vote on that as a board, as a council, as a majority vote. And if the council doesn't support it, then the discussion continues. We might want to put this in, but keep in mind, it's not
Yeah,
kind of the informal way we do things. Executive session, that it's actually, it follows what we currently do and how you have to have the specifics and all that. Here's kind of what you talked about before, Jonathan. Here's your I can become a dictator.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. I mean, that's the great thing about it. And then it's just kind of a summary. And this might be what we can put on the dais. This could be something we hand out, but the summary could be, this could be the 8.5, 11 sheet of, laminated paper.
That summary, Charlie, would be helpful in a laminated, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can refer to it.
I agree. So anyway, that's a real quick thumbnail of those 23 pages. I think it's a great read, and this might be something that is a part of the orientation of new council members, and doesn't hurt to remind us every couple of years, hey, here's our rules of procedure. Here's what it says, and spend some time running through this. It might help keep meetings moving along more efficiently once we get going. So
Okay.
that's
Do
all
we
I
feel?
really.
Yes, I guess I would like to entertain a motion to call the question. Meaning,
I object.
Delay.
nobody's so resolute as the recently educated,
Deborah, your mic is hot. What are you wanting to say?
No voting in work sessions.
I know we were joking.
That was a
Okay.
joke. Thank you.
I haven't been paying that much attention. I've been working.
Okay, so
So you didn't hear what I was commenting negatively about you earlier?
We changed the name of Glenwood Springs to back to Defiance. That passed. I'm
That
joking.
could be fun.
Charlie, thank you very much for shouldering a lot of the burden on this. Do you feel like you've gotten enough information from us that you can bring back a clean draft to the next meeting, which is next Thursday? And when I say the next meeting, I typically would like to have stuff into staff to be able to put into our packets the Friday before. That's a pretty tight timeline, I understand.
I'm looking at Monday. This is gonna be something I have to work on the weekend.
So I guess my question would be, I guess, to yourself, Tony and Rick, well, I guess not so much yourself because you're saying Monday, then that's Monday, but we do not routinely, but every once in a while get things that are late breaking and can't get into our packet by that Friday. So are you two okay with us receiving that by, at some point Monday evening or even as late as Tuesday morning?
Well, let me throw another comment out Deborah, are we gonna have a meeting, first meeting in July? Did you get responses from people on that?
And yes, we are.
So why don't we bump this to the first meeting in July? Because then what I can do is I can try to commit to getting to this group again, and Deborah will obviously distribute to everybody, kind of revision of this. And if we need to, we could, in a lot less time, maybe another hour, just go through and say, yeah, I did it, but here's some red lines. And so we're doing those red lines in a public meeting. We're not trying to do it in a non-public meeting.
I think if you feel like you would need it, but I feel like the non-public meeting we should have, I feel like there's enough information when we talk about things, and we will talk about things like boards and commissions, whether we want to have that or not. When we
All
talk about shall resign versus be asked to resign or things like that, I'm okay having that conversation with the full council at our, whenever that meeting is. And there's no hurry.
That's fine. And what I can commit to do is making sure Deborah has it so that it gets out to everybody by Monday evening. Okay, that gives me even some time on Monday if I get behind. But I got my son Zach. I get him every other weekend. So this weekend I won't get to start until late afternoon because that's the time I get to spend with him. So
Yeah, no problem.
so
All right, are we good?
you control the agenda. I'm just putting it out there.
Charlie, thank you for doing that.
Oh no, this is kind of, believe it or not, I find this stuff interesting. So that's how weird I am.
Yeah, that's weird.
You weren't supposed to say that, John.
I didn't. You did.
Oh, okay. Thank you all. I appreciate you listening to me and tolerating me and throughout this meeting. So,
Definitely.
You truly belong on the CML policy board, Charlie.
pardon?
You truly belong on CML.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I appreciate your support on that. And you did send a letter to the CML supporting me, Jonathan.
Oh,
I
good.
appreciate that letter. Yes.
You're
And
welcome.
Just so I got to know you signed that about 10 this morning.
I did authorize that. It wasn't by 10, but I did authorize
It
it.
basically said what you put in the email. If you haven't seen it, it said the same thing. You
Perfect.
polled the council and it was going to bring up next meeting. And that's what Kevin told me to put in there. So
Yeah, I write great emails.
yeah, you do.
I'm the best.
All right. Thank you all.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Rick.
you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you,
you,
Deborah.
Alyssa, for being here and doing
Thank
this.
you, Alyssa, very much, our unsung hero.
Great.
All
Bye,
right,
guys.
take care, guys.